What an excellent day for an exorcism.
We meant to make a good movie. We meant to make a scary movie. But I had no idea that it was going to be that good or that scary.
The effect was really searing on a lot of people because this wasn't just The Omen, it wasn't just Rosemary's Baby, it had a psychological, religious impact.
It's not a film about Dracula. It's not a film about the alien. It is a film about people who live up the street. It's about a real street in a real town with real people living in it, in the house, and upstairs on the third floor of this house is a real little girl who happens to be possessed by a demon.
It was strange and interesting to see how the film kind of from being a horror film became kind of a phenomenon, testing people's stamina. And you heard people saying that I was there, and when I was there, there were 3 people who fainted and were carried out, and there was one at my side who threw up, all these things.
I was as much watching what was going on, not believing that the world, that people could react in that way. I mean, I was like, why are they reacting? It's a movie.
The film delivers to this very day that very precious commodity, a powerful emotional response. Well, whether it's positive or negative, doesn't matter. It's a response. You were alive during those 2 hours. You were alive.
Somewhere between science and superstition, there is another world. The world of darkness.
I started writing The Exorcist because I frankly was unemployed. Comedy writing, which was my forte, and exclusively, had dried up. So I thought, all right, I have nothing better to do, and I might prove that I can write respectably in another medium. I had no concept whatever of what was to come.
The one hope, the only hope, The Exorcist.
Well, in 1949, I believe I was a junior at Georgetown University. And in class, I heard some details about a so-called case of possession and an exorcism that was going on in the neighborhood somewhere nearby. The victim, who was identified as a boy, was of a Lutheran family. There were poltergeist phenomena surrounding him, and the family had gone to their minister, who told them, let the boy stay in my house overnight. Well, all hell broke loose in that man's home. He then said, look, I don't know what to tell you about this. The Catholics claim to be able to do something about this. They deal with that sort of thing. And you might go to a Jesuit priest.
How do you go about getting an exorcism?
Many, many, many years later, it all came back to me, and I determined to write that story. Having written comedy only up to the point of beginning the novel of The Exorcist, now I was intimidated. No, I'm writing something serious now.
It's more than psychiatry, and you know that, Tom. Some of their problems come down to faith, their vocation, the meaning of their lives, and I can't cut it anymore.
Father Tom Birmingham, who was in the film and was the technical advisor, taught me in high school Anyway, I went to him looking for help.
So I said, well, I'll work with you then if, on one condition, that you take it seriously. I don't want another Rosemary's Baby. I want somebody that really will confront the awesome problem of the evil in God's world. So we worked for a year before he wrote the first page.
Novel is one thing, but you put it on the screen and you objectify. I mean, this story was begging to be a flop. Every studio passed. They were just afraid. I wasn't sure there was a movie in it. I thought, this needs an honest director that is not Catholic, that is agnostic on the subject, and can give this incredible story such a sense of documentary reality that it will work. I had seen The French Connection, and I wanted Billy Friedkin. And the Warner Brothers then grudgingly agreed.
After I was finally signed to direct the film, Bill said to me, now I have to tell you I have a great surprise. Here is my screenplay. And I took it home and eagerly read through it, and I thought it was not very good. I thought it was overwrought. I thought that it was filled with a lot of symbolism and underlined, and it wasn't the novel.
I remember 8 million flashbacks. Everything, it was a jumble.
I thought those adaptations he made were unnecessary, and I believed in the novel, which I told him, and I then took the copy of the book that he sent me and I marked it up with passages that I felt we could film.
Every night he would reread the novel, and he'd make these notes, and he'd come in and he'd say, I think we ought to start with this scene and go to that scene and that scene. And we went through the whole book that way.
I'm telling you that that thing upstairs isn't my daughter. Now, I want you to tell me that you know for a fact that there's nothing wrong with my daughter except in her mind. You tell me you know for a fact that an exorcism wouldn't do any good. You tell me that!
It deals with very heavy forces, and I was a little worried about what that would mean to work with those.
Of course, on a 15-month schedule, as we had, you certainly expect the laws of probability would presume that certain things would happen. But in my 32 years of making films, I've never had a set burn down, and we did on The Exorcist.
Well, we had a fire that was still a mystery.
The set caught on fire one weekend. When no one was there.
I remember that was terrible. Shut down. I think it shut us down for about 6 weeks.
The silk, as it burned, it fell onto the walls and fell onto the carpet and burned the carpet. And then the sprinklers came on and really wrecked it.
They never did find the reason for that either. They couldn't find an electrical problem. They couldn't find an arsonist. They couldn't find any substantial reason that occurred.
When I was filming, I would go to this little restaurant, which was in the Jesuit quarters, and this very, very old priest handed me this little medal of the Blessed Virgin. He said, you know why I'm giving you this? I said, why? He said, I want to tell you something about intervention. Did you ever hear the concept of intervention? I said, no. He said, it's a Gnostic concept. It comes out of the 15th century. If you do anything on the devil, anything at all on the devil, to reveal him as the trickster that he is, he will seek retribution against you. Either or he will even try to stop what you're trying to do, to unmask him. And he said, this medal will protect you. He said, be very careful, you take care of yourself. Maybe about 3 days later, it's kind of catacombed there, the Jesuit estates. And they have all these side rooms. Like little sitting rooms, maybe 4 or 5 of them when you walk down the hall. So I'm walking down the hall going to dinner one night, and I walk by, and on the periphery of my mind, I said, did I see a casket in there? And I walk back, and I look in the room, and there's this old priest in a casket, dead.
During the course of the film, there were 9 deaths, which is an enormous amount of deaths connected with the film. Some very directly, like the actor Jack McGowan, who gets killed in the film, completed shooting, and died.
Just through attrition, I think there was 3 or 4 people died.
There were a couple of unfortunate deaths during the filming.
There were 9, and that's just too many.
You know, I think on any film, you do have casualties, but I think we had more than our share.
It's very simple. If you have a production that lasts 2 weeks or 3 weeks, nothing happens. But if you have a production that lasts for a year or 9 months, a lot of things have to happen. Accidents one way or the other.
Max von Sydow's brother died. The assistant cameraman whose wife had a baby during the shoot, the baby died. The man who refrigerated the set died. The young black night watchman.
And these weren't casualties from stunts or things like that. These were kind of men standing behind a camera all of a sudden, dropping dead.
Of course, it always makes for great stories about what happens, if it was cursed or whatever.
It's very good for publicity, but if you don't believe in devil, you don't believe in curses. Simple.
You heard a lot of gossip. I'm even confused by now if some of it was created by us.
It was totally hokum, but I think there were so many people trying to make something out of something.
Then Friedkin called me and said, would you come down and exorcise the set? So I said, no, Billy, no. I don't want to increase anxiety or anything like that.
But there was definitely a feeling that it could happen. We were playing around with something. I even felt it. I felt around, I was playing around with something I shouldn't be playing around with.
I designed the film so that there would be blazingly bright scenes, as in Iraq, and then there would be these dark scenes in the attic and the exorcism room, and that the whole film would, in a way, alternate between the forces of dark and light in a kind of literal way. Georgetown is a perfect place to set The Exorcist. Bill, I think, arrived at that because he happened to have experience of living there.
I went to school. I graduated from Georgetown. I then was stationed in the Air Force in Washington, D.C. for a time. I knew it.
The Kennedys live there. It's filled with important people, congressmen, government people, writers, etc.
And I knew instantly that this was cinematic as hell, especially in the fall when we shot there, with the leaves falling and you know, nice breezes that came and went unexpectedly.
The first time I saw them, I saw that there was an ominosity, if that's a word, to them. I mean, I saw them, I thought, wow, how is the stunt? I'm not going to do it. How is the stunt man going to do this? Because they were vertical.
There were 97 hard stone steps. It looked like forever going down there. And so I went out and I got all the rubber I could find, 1/2 inch, and I lined every one of those steps with rubber.
And all the Georgetown kids, with the little capitalists that they are, they got the roofs of all the people around there on top of the roofs, and they sold tickets for $5 a head so you could watch the stunt. I'm watching the stunt myself, and there must have been, I'd say, 500 people on roofs. And he dove down those stairs twice. I asked him how he did it. He said, Zen. I said, what's that? He said, complete and total non-resistance. My body becomes totally relaxed.
I remember when we were preparing for the film, Billy was going to art museums and looking through art books and finding images that inspired him. And that famous shot that was used in the ad of Mark standing looking at the house, I think, although the composition is different, it was inspired by a Magritte. And of course, the thing in Magritte is that it's always very truthful, but then there's this oddness that happens within the realism.
That shot was conceived by Billy and Owen Roisman, our cameraman, to be something extraordinary.
Well, of course, Billy said to me, this is a very important scene in the picture. I mean, this is the introduction, really, of the priest that's going to perform the exorcism. And he described what he would like it to look like.
It took some doing to make it work. That shot actually took 2 full nights of filming to pull off.
The shaft of light does everything. It's like an ethereal quality to it. The fact that he's silhouetted in it, the graphics of it, the whole thing, it just feels very spiritual and very ethereal. We just see this cab arrive and this person get out and walk up to the house. And now all of a sudden, there's this huge spotlight, this shaft, aiming right at this person. So you know there's something special about it.
One of the spooky parts of it is the contrast, rather than, you know, thinking you're going to go in and you're going to see the darkness and the bats flying around. And these were beautiful people. They had all the advantages and they lived well. All of a sudden, this horrendous thing happens to them.
First of all, you wanted to see these things happen as realistically as possible. I knew of no way to achieve these effects realistically with opticals in the state they were in then. Today, it would be a piece of cake. Today, they can make you believe that the Titanic is sinking. In those days, I could not, with an optical, make you believe that a bed was thumping on its own. It had to happen on the set, and it was a case of trial and error.
Marcel Vercateur, the special effects man, who was brilliant, he conceived and designed all those effects so that you couldn't see anything. I mean, everything was built in. They're just amazing.
He was a strange soul, like me, an experimenter and a perfectionist.
We started off with one particular thing, just elevating the bed like.
Amen. Oh, Lord, hear my prayer.
So what I did was put enough weight and leverage behind to raise the bed. Then I pulled it back down again. So the bed was trying to fly, but it couldn't because I was pulling it back. It really worked well. But anyways, we got so many things that I built another bed, and then I built another bed. So I had 3 beds.
Hasten to our call for help.
So all these beds all did different things. The room itself was sitting on 8 pneumatic wheels in order to create the earthquake.
And any time that the set was required to shake, I mean, the 5 or 6 grips would go out there and rock the set. All of that work in that room was excruciating to get because it was all done mechanically.
Do something!
I said to Billy, if I was a devil, I'd get up and grab it, and I would thrash her. I would let her know. He said, go ahead and do it.
It's a rigging that Marcel Vercateur came up with that was a mold of my back, and it was like a hard metal. And then they had like a brace around my stomach, and then it was laced up on the sides.
I had her completely strapped in, and I had her.
It was actually manually pumped by some big man on the other side of the wall.
I could throw her up and back, and I had her.
And the lacing came loose while I was being thrown, and so as I went forward, the piece was coming back. So it was a constant. And the dialogue was, please make it stop, it hurts, it burns, whatever.
She started screaming.
I didn't know what to do. And so I'm just yelling, it hurts really, really, and somebody thought I yelled Billy. And I actually never broke character.
She wanted out. She wanted really out. She was really getting thrashed.
That's the footage I use in the movie where I'm crying my eyes out because they are brutally damaging my back.
I had a rig around my midriff with a wire coming out the back, and the stuntman was pulling me.
So we took her back the first time, and it was a good shot. And Billy said, we're going to do it again.
I said, Billy, he's pulling me too hard. I can get hurt. And Billy said, well, it has to look real. I said, I understand, but I'm telling you, I could get hurt. And the stuntman was standing there listening to this, and Billy said to him, okay, don't pull her so hard. But as I turned away, I felt them exchange a look.
And he said, give it to her this time. And I said, really? And he says, give it to her. And this is Ellen Burstyn, right? She's a nice lady. And so I said, okay. So when I hauled off, she came completely off her feet.
You see me hit and you see me reach for my back. I screamed in horrendous pain. Billy motioned to Owen to tilt the camera down on me. And I saw it, and I was so furious and said, turn the effing camera off, because I couldn't stand that he was willing to just get a quick shot of it before they called the ambulance, you know.
Ellen didn't like it too well, and she went to see her chiropractor, and chiropractor said, you're all right. Just a couple of days, you'll get over the soreness. But that's show business, I guess.
It was way beyond what anyone needs to do to make a movie.
Well, it was a very difficult film. Billy was reaching for the limit. He was committed to it, and he was obsessed by it himself, and that obsession was contagious.
He knew what to do with this film from the minute that he read the book. And it was his vision, so all of us just participated by doing what he wanted.
Billy didn't kid around. When he said he liked something, they said he really liked it, you see. He never flattered.
And if you didn't do things the way he liked, he'd let you know about it in no uncertain terms.
Billy can be totally irascible. Billy has reduced me to tears on more than one occasion on the set.
And you never knew when he was going to explode or not explode. So there was always a tension on the set.
Oh, come on, shut up in there!
And yet I keep coming back, you know. I keep coming back for more because I have the greatest respect for him as a filmmaker.
And he knew how to make each one of us work. And that in itself was very interesting because I got to watch everything from the bed, right? I'm looking around and watching how he was with Jason, how he was with Max, how he was with Ellen, how he was with Kitty. I saw a lot. I watched.
But he also liked to stimulate the actors. That was what his feeling was. So he would sometimes shoot off a gun or something when he wanted someone to look startled.
And that's really what pissed me off. And I told him, I said, never do that again. You know, I'm an actor. I don't need all these artificial stimulants. We had this absolute silence in the room while I'm listening to the tape, trying to decipher what it was, and the phone rang. And he shot his shotgun this close to my head. I said, you son of a bitch. How dare you do that? What if you went a little bit to the right? And Friedkin says, it's all right, we got Jack Nicholson in the wings.
Billy would fire guns all the time.
Well, the actors got used to this. And they'd come in the morning, and I had a good relationship with them. And like Max would walk in and say, good morning, Owen. Where are the guns this morning? I said, well, there's a .45 behind that wall and a shotgun behind that one. He said, thank you very much.
He had total freedom, I think. And of course, he behaved like a man with total freedom and total power. So, no, I enjoyed very much working with him. Although it was, he used maybe sometimes methods that I was not used to.
My dear friend Billy Friedkin is a maniac. And I love him, but he's a maniac.
Billy would do anything to motivate an actor. After Jason Miller dies, when Father Bill goes in to give him the last rites, We did 13 takes, 15 takes, 17 takes, I'm not quite sure.
Do you want to make a confession?
Bill Friedkin wanted Father Dyer to react in some emotional way. This is his best friend, lying there in a pool of blood.
And Father Bill could never get it right.
So Billy comes over to me and says, Bill, you're just doing this by the numbers.
He was a non-actor. He couldn't emote.
And I said, Billy, I have just given my best friend the last rites 15 times in one night, and it's now 2:30 in the morning.
Friedkin and I had a little signal that we'd use to silently roll the camera and sound, and he asked me at this time to do just that.
And he said, I understand. He said, do you trust me? Well, you always trust somebody unless they ask you.
And Billy went in and slapped him across the face.
He belted me right across the chops and backed off, and I went in the scene, and if you look at that carefully, when I'm giving the last right, my hand's going like that. And I wasn't making my hand go like that. That was sheer nerve juice, that all I had left.
He wrote to himself and won't want me just to cut his to it. How many blood is it?
He was tough, but it was very stimulating. He drove me to some of the best work that I'd done up to that time. A makeup artist gets a great thrill changing someone's face because, in a sense, he is creating a new living creature. I was faced with the problem of making this 12-year-old little girl, very pretty little girl with apple cheeks and a butterball nose, make her into a demon. And it was an incredible challenge.
God bless Dick Smith. Certainly nothing could have prepared anybody for what that experience was going to be. First, he had to do the casting of the face. He created different makeups, which we tested.
I think it was 6 different, all different makeups. The very first one I did was an all-out witchy makeup with a black wig and bushy eyebrows, and it was terrible. But it proved one thing, and that was that I could take this round face and make it look pretty horrible. So then it was a matter of kind of backtracking, and I tried. There were several other more moderate makeups. There was one that seemed to be promising. We filmed it, and Billy said, it's no good. It doesn't work. And the reason, I had to agree, the reason it didn't work was because the dialogue of the other people in the scene didn't match this horror.
One day I had the thought that the disfiguration that results in her face should come from something that Reagan did to herself. And I thought, what if in the scene where she's masturbating with a crucifix, we see that her whole face is streaming with blood, fresh blood, as though she had used the crucifix to scar herself.
The makeup, once established, progressed. And here she's got even more wounds and stuff on her face. I had to keep making it worse. The cuts became kind of raised welts or scars, but I placed them very strategically.
Almost like nightmarish shapes, but all growing out of the idea that she scarred herself with the crucifix, and these are gangrenous sores.
And I changed her mouth. I thickened the upper lip, and I gave her a thick, distorted, cracked lower lip that kind of drooped over to one side, and that twisted her mouth.
I used to wear false teeth because a child actor is supposed to be perfect. So I was used to wearing things like that. Again, he took a cast of my tongue. And so this, it was fit on my tongue perfectly, and it was just, I just had to ball it all up and stick it in my mouth. But I mean, it's horrible in the movie. It is, I admit. That's just a horrible, horrible thing to look at.
For all my sins and the power to confront this cruel demon.
And of course, the contact lenses were the other key thing. And Linda could never get used to them. So I had to put anesthetizing drops in her eyes before putting them in.
What's that?
It was a very painful process, and of course I had them, and different sizes and shapes, and the big ones, the ones that whited out my eyes, were actually the most comfortable of all of them.
I was concerned for Linda. I think we all were kind of concerned because she was young and innocent and not into this thing at all.
She was just a kid that liked an ice cream soda in between, and it would laugh, and as soon as you said roll it, boom, she turned on this demon.
Mighty Father, everlasting God, and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Billy Friedkin says action. And this is the first time the girl's going to say her dialogue.
In every need he has delivered. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
And Linda looks up with beautiful blue eyes and that cherubic face and says, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell." And Max goes, "Cut." He said, "I've just lost it, Billy. I've just lost it."
The fact that there were very few people on the set while filming allowed me to say the dialogue that I was being asked to say, because nobody made anything weird about it, and I'm sure their ears must have just been like, "Oh my God."
Even the stagehands would kind of cringe when she had to say foul language.
No one was allowed to laugh, or it was a very controlled set. And they were never, allowed to make me feel uncomfortable.
So one day I asked her, I said, "Linda, how do you feel when you have to say these lines?" She says, "Oh, it's not me, it's Reagan."
Her capability at that age of handling what she went through was remarkable, totally remarkable.
She just divorced herself from this horrible character and even from the language.
I certainly, as an assistant director, felt for this 13-year-old girl who was in makeup for 4 hours every morning before she even got on the floor.
It took hours to light every shot, and so you couldn't keep Linda Blair or another 12-year-old in that rig for hours. Eileen Dietz was about 25 or 26 years old. She was the same size as Linda, who was 12. We'd light Eileen Dietz and get her out and put Linda Blair in to do the scene.
So he may no longer hold captive this person.
There are a couple of shots that we did with Eileen Dietz where, like, she backhands the doctor and knocks him across the room, and we're behind her. Obviously, Eileen's blow was much more powerful and believable, so we're over her shoulder. In the scene where she's masturbating with a crucifix, when the crucifix goes into the crotch area, that's Eileen Dietz.
I didn't ever think they would allow us to film or exhibit the crucifix masturbation scene, and yet I couldn't think of how to do without it.
I didn't understand what masturbation was at that age. So I didn't understand, there was a box and a sponge and Karo syrup with red food coloring. And that was between my legs. So I just had to put the cross into the box. That's all I was doing. I had no idea what it was until many years later.
When I was writing the novel, I said, now I have come to the point where this woman, this non-believer, in desperation, is going to go to priests, to witch doctors. What on earth could drive her to that? What is the worst possible thing that I can think of?
I think it was merited, and I think it served a purpose. It was probably one of the most vicious things I've ever seen in a film.
It certainly does make this statement of to what lengths evil will go to manifest.
To this day, even with sensibilities that you think are so utterly jaded and depraved, it remains the most shocking piece of footage I have ever seen.
There were various different effects that had to be done in the script, and one of them was the head turning around backwards. And I couldn't come up with any idea how to do that on her. The only way to do it was to make a whole dummy and have a mechanical head.
Dick took a cast of Linda, a total body cast. And then after the body cast turned out really well, then we sat down together and Dick says, If you'll do everything on the inside, I'll do everything on the outside.
The head and the torso are rigid plastic because the head had to rotate smoothly.
The only problem was going to be the separation. But if I spun the head, the hair would come down and cover up the crack. So I could spin the head. I could go around 2-3 times if I wanted to.
Amen.
I worked on the eyes, and I used remote control.
Let my cry come unto thee.
And she would sit there and look at you in the room. It was frightening. It was so alive. In fact, I didn't want to call it a dummy. And I quit calling it a dummy because it was embarrassing. I said, I don't want to call you a dummy. We decided we were going to try it out, so put it in the front seat of a taxi in the summertime in New York City.
The head would wobble around, so it looked like it was alive.
And the people would stare at this thing, and then finally it would just spin its head around, and that was it. And then tell the cab, get out of here.
This is the device I made to create the vomiting effect. This side piece is actually a very thin, flat tube, and there's a little nozzle connecting the two. I can take this apart, and the tubes would be hidden behind the head of the person. Actually, it was not Linda Blair, but Eileen Dietz that was used for this rather unpleasant task, and it would fit snugly on her face like this. And then I connected these to a special pump that Marcel Vercouter had loaded with hot pea soup. I understood that what was wanted was a kind of diffused spray, not a single stream. And that's what we did. I didn't learn till years afterwards that in the editing, that Billy didn't like the garden hose type, and he wanted that blob hitting in the face. So it was matted in. That was one of the first optical things that was done.
I was on the other side of the bed with my rig, and I'm supposed to hit Jason in the sweater.
In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, geez, might probably better if they really hit me in the face, you know, because it really...
I got all set up, and now they changed the lights, and they did this and that, you know. Pretty soon, I said, maybe my vomit is getting a little cold. So I raised up trajectory a little bit, and I maybe cranked on a little bit. And anyway, when I let go, I hit Jason flush in the face.
My momentary reaction was, yeah, I was a little pissed off.
He went backwards, and he was, if he could have got a hold of me, everybody on the set went, oh. And I felt like, you know, and so they said, clean Jason up and we'll do it the right way. So they cleaned him up, got him another sweater, and we shot it 3 or 4 times after that. But then after they started to put it together and they saw the expression on his face, that is actually the one they used. It was a nice mistake. I enjoyed it. Jason didn't.
You remember in the little girl's room, whenever she went demonic, the room became extremely cold.
And of course, how do you make breath show in a room? Today they can draw it in digitally. It's rather expensive, but it's less expensive than what we did.
Billy says, we got to have breath. So I said, okay, Billy, you're going to get it. So I got a hold of this refrigeration fella, and I built this giant cocoon.
So we had 4 massive air conditioners, which we found we had to turn on all night. And by the time we got to the set the next morning, it was 30 or 40 below zero.
It was so cold. It was cold inside, it was cold outside.
Billy would check a thermometer on the wall, and he wouldn't shoot unless it was down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit.
He wanted to see the breadth of the actors, and I think also in the back of his mind he decided that the extreme cold would really influence the performance as well.
It was difficult to act and express facially emotions when your face was frozen, literally.
The perspiration was freezing on my hair was frozen.
One morning, we had a lovely surprise. We came in and found that there was like a thin, thin layer of snow over the entire set. That somehow a lot of moisture had gotten into the atmosphere and it had condensed.
Be silent!
We're all there in our Arctic cold weather Eddie Bauer suits, and she's in her nightie.
There were times I could wear long underwear, there were times I could not. There were times the blankets were on me, many times they were not.
It's the power! Holy water!
Was it cold? Yes. Did I like it? Not much. It's probably why I hate cold so much nowadays. I was cold, yeah.
For the first time, I said to myself, you got principal actors, not in Alaska, not in an ice house, on the set in the middle of the summer in New York City, seeing breath.
But every time Owen would turn his lights on to light a shot, the temperature of the room would increase.
And after maybe an hour and a half of filming, the temperature would go above freezing, so you had to shut down, shut off all the lights, and build up the cold again.
And this would go on, you know, for days and days and days and days. We were in that cold room for 60 days.
The head of production of Warner Brothers came in from time to time, flew in to see why it was taking us so long to do this, and he would stand in the back of the set just shaking his head with his mouth. He couldn't believe, you know, and no one really could believe this was going on or that would ever produce anything like a believable result.
Did you do that?
When I started the film, I had no idea how we were going to do the demon voice.
And Billy pulled out a book of Hieronymus Bosch paintings and said, I want Linda Blair's voice to sound like Hieronymus Bosch. It didn't necessarily make total sense to me, but the impression was that Linda Blair's voice should be a kind of chorus of voices. And at the center of it should be whatever we in general consider to be evil.
Who are you?
No one there!
We took Linda Blair's voice in the pre-production and we spent 150 hours making Linda Blair's voice into a different voice.
Your mother's in here with us, Karis.
We made her sound bad, evil.
And I'm the devil!
We played the stuff for Friedkin, and he turned around and he said, that's no good. You know, I thought, oh, fuck, 150 hours of work just out the window.
Billy just thought another voice would be better than trying to treat Reagan's into some electronic system, which we didn't really have technically at that time.
I think we all auditioned for it. Your mother sucks cocks in hell. Now you try it.
I started to verbalize to Bill and others that the demon should not in any way be a man's voice, but it should be a kind of neutral voice, neither male nor female, but with male characteristics, but with female characteristics. Who the hell sounds like that? Who has ever sounded like that? And the name Mercedes McCambridge came into my mind's eye. She was a great actress and had this most distinguished voice. We gave her raw eggs and whiskey, and she started chain smoking, and I lashed her to a chair.
Now kindly undo these straps.
The most curious things would happen in her throat. Double and triple sounds would emerge at once. Wheezing sounds, very much akin to what you can imagine a person inhabited by various demons would sound like.
They were all human voices in most cases. Sometimes we put some animal voices in. He likes to mix voices up occasionally. Different sounds to create a sound.
I don't think there was anything like it, sound-wise, up to that point where everything was just super exaggerated.
It took 16 weeks to make this track, and we did a lot of experimentation with various noises.
Took a bee and did, you know, what every kid does with insects, puts it in a jar and punches holes in the top, and the bee started buzzing around, and I just stuck the mic there. Sometimes there would be processed.
I saw a film called El Topo, and I said to my production manager who did that sound, he said, there's a guy named Gonzalo Gavira. He spoke not a word of English, but we brought him in here and showed him the film, and he was flabbergasted. He didn't understand any of the words, but he got what was going on.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
He actually stood in front of a mic with the film on the screen behind him like that. We opened a mic, and he would use his body and objects and things, cans and various things, and he created a lot of the sounds that you hear in the film. He borrowed an old leather wallet, a cracked old leather wallet that had, as this does, credit cards in it from someone on the sound crew. And he held this cracked leather wallet up to a microphone like this. That became the sound of the little girl's head turning around. That and a number of other really unusual and impressionistic and expressionistic sounds were created in front of an open mic by a Mexican peasant who had no shoes.
After cutting the opening sequence of Iraq, we kind of went through the whole film and repaced it. Looking at it, I thought, well, there's a lot of exposition, basically, that you really don't need because it's slowing the film down, like taking a walk with Reagan through Washington, seeing all the monuments.
I know that there's been a lot of controversy about certain scenes that are out of the film, particularly the last scene. My feeling as the interpreter of that material was, we don't need it.
But there's a sense in which we did need it, Bill.
How's the girl?
She seemed fine.
Many people, to this day, interpret The Exorcist as a downer. I thought that the scene from the novel between Kinderman and Dyer would allow the audience to feel, hey, cool it, everything's okay. You knew this relationship that Karras had with Kinderman lives now through Father Dyer. God's in his heaven, all is right with the world. That's something I think that the film could use.
I don't want to direct the way people think about this beyond what is already, to me, self-evident. People actually believed what they saw on the screen. Some of them maybe had a different interpretation of that. That's always bothered you. I've always rejoiced in it, frankly.
You son of a bitch!
Everybody who sees the film takes from it what they bring to it.
God damn you! Take me! Take me!
Because this relates to certain other cuts in the film. The dialogue between Marin and Karras in a kind of a break in the exorcism scene, which in the film now is just two guys sitting on the stairs, but which you had written a quite beautiful dialogue.
Why this girl? It makes no sense.
I think the point is to make us despair. To see ourselves as animal and ugly. To reject the possibility that God could love us.
I don't want him to think the devil won. I just don't.
Well, you know, to me, it's how could they possibly think that? I think what we should probably do with this new version is have you come on at the end and say to the audience, this film's not a downer, folks. This is not a downer.
I'm ready.
Okay. Sequence, it comes right upon the discovery that Burke Dennings is dead. And I remember having great difficulty getting what I thought was a proper reaction from Ellen Burstyn.
He must have been drunk. He fell down from the top of the steps right outside. By the time he hit M Street, he broke his neck.
Oh, God.
I could not make the transition to how she would have reacted right on top of that to the spider walk.
Bill, it may have been could be a problem in the writing. You know, I really mean that, because what you're asked to do there is deal with a double climax.
Well,
either
three.
one is the end of the scene.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
I just thought of how I should have written it, Bill. Actually, the moment she hears the words, Burke's dead, there should have been a scream instantly from Sharon, Chris, before there's any time to react to that, and the boom.
That would have been great.
Oh, God.
I set out from the outset to make this book because I think it's as good a novel as I've ever read. I think it's as good as anything I've ever read by Edgar Allan Poe or Kafka, you know, or some very other, you know, very distinguished writers who've worked in this particular area.
Wow. You're too kind.
No, you know I mean that. I've said
Billy.
it before.
Thank you.
Give me that $10 now, would you, before that?
You want it in drachma?